Amidst the pantheon of superhero legends, one icon swings beyond the ordinary. Spider-Man isn't merely your friendly neighborhood hero. He's the beating heart of cinema's most legendary trilogy sagas, forever altering the fabric of blockbuster storytelling. From Tobey Maguire's groundbreaking trilogy to Tom Holland's modern MCU arc, we've seen Spider-Man's story evolve in ways that set the standard for superhero storytelling. But what makes a trilogy truly great? Why do some film trilogies stick with us for years, while others struggle to complete their journey? A symphony of storytelling. A true trilogy is a lot more than just 3 acts. It's a crescendo of ambition, where every thread weaves toward a peak that thrills, transforms, and transcends. Spider-Man's legacy swings between triumph and tragedy, a brilliant element in cinematic alchemy, and haunting echoes of what happens when a saga's final chord is left forever unplayed. Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man series had all the ingredients for a great trilogy. A charming Peter Parker, a smart and bold Gwen Stacy, and a fresh and grounded take on the hero. But instead of building a satisfying 3-part story, it collapsed under its own ambition. Studio bosses forced the sequels to cram in too many villains, tease future spin-offs, and rush through emotional moments, all to set up a bigger cinematic universe. The result? A messy second film that felt less like a Spider-Man story and more like a checklist of corporate demands. Fans were left confused, the plot spiraled into chaos, and plans for a third movie vanished. This is why The Amazing Spider-Man is a cautionary tale for trilogy writers. A good trilogy needs a clear plan. One story split into 3 chapters, where each film builds on the last and leads to a meaningful ending. Instead of focusing on Peter's growth or Gwen's legacy, the series got distracted by flashy villains, empty Easter eggs, and setups for movies that never happened. The lesson? A trilogy isn't a playground for studio greed. It's a promise to your fans. Stick to the heart of your characters. Give their journeys room to breathe, and earn that final chapter. Otherwise, you're just leaving fans with a story that never truly swings home. Meanwhile, Tobey Maguire's trilogy succeeds because it follows a well-structured 3-act arc. The first film establishes Peter as Spider-Man, the second pushes him to question his role, and the third brings his story full circle, flaws and all. And then there's Tom Holland's MCU trilogy, which pulls off something even more ambitious. It not only tells a complete arc, but also redefines Spider-Man for an entirely new generation. Unlike previous versions, Holland's Peter Parker starts as a kid learning the ropes under Tony Stark's guidance. But by No Way Home, he's completely on his own, stripped of everything except his core identity. In this 8th video of our Great Stories series, we're looking at what makes a trilogy work, how character arcs, themes, and storytelling structure define the success, or failure, of a 3-film journey. Of course, even the most meticulously planned trilogy can crumble with one irreplaceable element: a character worth rooting for. We've all seen how a shaky foundation derails a saga in our previous episode on how to write great fiction. Which is why, for those curious, we've spent time dissecting what makes a protagonist truly timeless. A great trilogy isn't just 3 movies slapped together, but a carefully planned journey where each installment builds upon the last. Spider-Man's best trilogies show us exactly how to structure this kind of long-form storytelling. So, what are the essential elements that make a trilogy truly work? First, each movie must serve a unique purpose. Think of a trilogy as a 3-act structure stretched across 3 films. The first film introduces the character and their worlds, setting up the themes and core conflicts. The second film deepens the stakes, challenging the hero in ways they never expected. The third film brings resolution, completing the journey in a way that feels earned. Tobey Maguire's trilogy nails this formula. Spider-Man 2002 gives us the classic origin story. Spider-Man 2 pushes Peter to his lowest point, forcing him to question if he even wants to be a hero. Spider-Man 3, while flawed, aims to wrap up his relationships, his internal struggles, and his battle with responsibility. It actually flips the structure. Tom Holland's trilogy doesn't start with an origin story. It starts with an established Spider-Man who still has a lot to learn. Instead of getting his defining tragedy in the first film like Tobey and Andrew's Peter Parker, Holland's Spider-Man doesn't truly lose everything until No Way Home, which acts as his origin story 3 films in the making. This bold approach shows that a trilogy doesn't have to follow the same formula, as long as it delivers a complete arc. But if some trilogies succeed, others struggle. The Amazing Spider-Man movies had strong moments, but its planned trilogy never got a third film. The problem? Lack of clear direction. The contrast really highlights why thoughtful storytelling and long-term planning are so important in a multi-film saga. The Amazing Spider-Man series never had a solid roadmap. Critics noted that Amazing Spider-Man 2 jammed in so many villains and side plots that it felt overstuffed and unfocused. By contrast, Marvel's Spider-Man Homecoming was built with a clear plan. It skips rehashing the origin and instead ties directly into the MCU, picking up after Civil War with one main villain and Tony Stark as Peter's mentor. For those curious about how this approach was put into practice, Homecoming's bonus features, for example the Blu-ray segment Coolest Mentor Ever on Tony Stark, actually break down those creative decisions, showing how deliberately the story was mapped out. You can find the extended cut down in the description below. The first movie set up a solid foundation, but the sequel introduced too many plot lines. Gwen's fate, Harry Osborn's revenge, the Sinister Six setup, without a clear plan to wrap them up. Without a strong roadmap, the series collapsed under its own weight. A trilogy needs long-term planning. Even if every detail isn't locked in from the start, the core themes and character arcs must be consistent. Otherwise, we end up with a story that starts strong but fizzles out. So, what makes a trilogy feel complete according to you? Let's discuss in the comments. Which Spider-Man trilogy worked best for you? What would you have changed about the Amazing Spider-Man films? Of course, even the most iconic trilogies leave us hungry for what's next. And if you're curious how Spider-Man's greatest sequels turned follow-ups into masterpieces, consider this your backstage pass. Hit subscribe and we'll swing straight into the secrets of crafting stories that just don't continue, they transcend. After all, every epic deserves a sequel that earns its web. A trilogy's only as strong as its ending. We've seen plenty of franchises that start strong but fall apart in the final chapter. A great trilogy needs an ending that feels earned. One that ties together character arcs, themes, and emotional stakes in a way that leaves us satisfied. So, how did Spider-Man's trilogies handle their conclusions? Let's start with Tobey Maguire's trilogy. Spider-Man 3 had the tough job of concluding Peter's story, wrapping up his relationships with Harry and MJ, closing his arc of revenge versus forgiveness, and giving him one final test as a hero. Even though the film had its flaws, its emotional beats land. Peter and Harry reconcile, Peter forgives Sandman, and he and MJ find their way back to each other. It's a full circle moment that, despite the messy execution, respects Peter's journey. Then we have Tom Holland's Spider-Man trilogy, which delivers one of the strongest superhero endings in recent memory. No Way Home strips Peter of everything: his friends, his home, even his identity, forcing him to become Spider-Man in the purest sense. Instead of ending with a massive reward, it closes on a quiet, bittersweet moment. Peter, now truly alone, swings into a New York City that no longer knows him. It makes sense. Peter Parker's journey's always been about sacrifice, and No Way Home leans into that, showing us a hero who chooses responsibility over personal happiness. And what makes it even better? It sets up a whole new chapter where Peter finally gets to be the classic self-made Spider-Man we all know and love. If there's one lesson here, it's that a trilogy needs a satisfying conclusion. It doesn't have to answer every question, but it should bring its core themes full circle. Spider-Man 3 gave us resolution. No Way Home gave us transformation. But The Amazing Spider-Man 2 left us with a story that was never truly finished. And that's what makes a great trilogy. It's not just about how it starts, but how it ends. The best stories don't give us a hero, they show us how that hero becomes something greater. And every great trilogy needs a strong middle chapter, a sequel that connects the dots and adds depth. Spider-Man's best follow-ups up the stakes without losing what made them special. And this is what our next episode's all about. We break down the formula of how to write a perfect sequel, build tension, and create endings that feel earned.